Hello, security pros. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's ESA webinar, POTS line replacement while increasing your engagement with customers. During this webinar, you will learn how you can save your customers from expensive and troublesome POTS copper phone lines. Not only that, how you can increase your company's revenue without adding one new customer, but while saving your customers money. I'm Hannah Boone, the Marketing Director of the Electronic Security Association, and I'm excited to lead this webinar here today. But before we dive in, I'd like to provide you some tips for those of you joining it on your first ESA webinar. So first of all, welcome. You will be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If a question or comment comes to mind at any point during today's session, please click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ensure that we save some time for your questions with our experts here today. We'll also be recording this webinar so that you can re-watch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow you'll receive an email thanking you for your attendance today, along with a link to the recording. We at ESA realize that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time here with us today. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our professionals. We have Greg Herman, who is the Director of Mobile Solutions at Mattel. And Greg, if you're ready, you can take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. So again, thanks everyone for joining. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Greg Herman, Director of Mobile Solutions with Mattel. And today I'd like to kind of review with you all what Mattel has positioned for our POTS line replacement solution for both our direct customers and our wholesale resellers. This is a solution which allows you to eliminate the incumbent LEC dial tone, whether or not that's CenturyLink or AT&T or Verizon, whomever it is in that territory, and replace that with dial tone provided by Mattel provided equipment, resold by you to your customers that will allow you to grab some of that dial tone revenue that you relied on your customers to provide in the past. So Jack, if you go ahead and let's get started. Next slide, please. So first things first, a little bit about Mattel. Mattel was founded in 1996, and we are a privately held company. We are also a multinational. We do business across the world with 19 points of presence throughout the world. We do have over 5,000 business customers and 25,000 M&S locations. We have offices in New York, New Jersey, Utah, DC, Puerto Rico. We're well across the United States. And we support 24/7 service. So regardless of where your customers are, when they may be having a need for interaction or engagement with us, we are available to support them. So let's go on and continue to the next slide. One thing we do want you to know is this solution, along with all other solutions Mattel provides, whether or not that's SD-WAN, firewall solutions, managed hosted voice, the POTS transformation that we're discussing today, everything is effectively a managed product, right? And we are recognized 4 times in a row now by Gartner as the leader in managed network services. And you can see that, we're well ahead of carriers like AT&T and Verizon in our ability to deliver the highest level of customer service. Jack, continue. So this is really what's brought us here today, right? For my entire career in telco, I was always told copper is going to go away, copper is going to go away. Well, it never did until it finally did a few years back when the FCC issued the Forbearance Act, which basically allowed the LECs to kind of do what they wanted with their dial tone, right? And each has kind of positioned themselves a little bit differently. Verizon still will service your legacy POTS lines, but their estimated time to repair on those POTS services have gone from, typically a 24 to 48-hour turnaround to several months, or even just placing you on a copper to fiber conversion, and you don't know when that's going to happen. And then, of course, we do know that when you often place security systems on a high-speed fiber connection or dial tone provided by a high-speed fiber connection, they don't always play nice. Signals don't always terminate at the central station correctly. Inbound programming issues then start to come about. And then you have, LECs like AT&T and CenturyLink Lumen, right? They've gone the opposite way. Rather than continuing to support, what they're doing is they're increasing their rates. Jack and myself, we've seen, quotes from AT&T specific territories for a single dial tone pair of upwards from $800 a month to $1,200 a month just for a single telephone line. And that's untenable for our customers, and AT&T knows that, and they just want you to move to something else. But again, that something else can be difficult to move to. Not all panels can support IP. Not all panels can support a cellular dial interface. So, POTS lines still become a thing. And well, that's what we're here to talk about, how you can provide access with that existing POTS interface on their security panel and still keep them up and running with arms and disarms and daily timer tests and inbound programming all being successful. Let's continue. So this is, again, kind of what I was talking about, 500% increase in the past 5 years in some territories. AT&T has raised rates twice in the past 6 years, and the other carriers are doing the same way. And then again, those estimated time to repairs are just going up and up and up and up. And, we're a group of security professionals, and probably a lot of you also work in the fire life safety systems. And, a customer or a panel being without dial tone for upwards of 120 days, well, that's going to result in a facility being red tagged and eventually probably being shut down because there's no fire monitoring equipment that's able to report properly to Central. And our customers simply can't have that. So, Jack, let's continue. So, in talking about what we can transform, right? And this isn't limited to just security systems. And, you guys as security professionals probably really just kind of looked at, hey, I can deliver a security system. I can deliver some cameras, motion sensors, door sensors, things of that nature. But your customers always had dial tone provided to a lot of other different endpoints, such as fax machines, fire alarms, elevators, out-of-band management, ATMs, regular even analog telephones. These are all aspects of a customer's telecommunication spend. That is something that you as a security provider could also take advantage of. And you can, let your customer know, hey, I can provide dial tone to your panel, but I can also provide dial tone to your backup phone system. I can provide dial tone to your elevators. This is all revenue that the carriers got before that is now an available revenue stream through MetTel to the security industry. Jack, if you could continue. So let's talk about this, and there's a lot to unpack on this slide. So, and if there are questions, feel free to just type them up in real time, and Jack will work on facilitating them over. So let's first start from the left, and we're going to go to the right here. This is a multi-WAN router. So what does that mean? It means it can use one of two at a time LTE carriers. We typically deliver it with AT&T and Verizon, but we do have the ability to deliver it on effectively any carrier in the United States and Canada using what we call our single SIM platform. The device has a wired Ethernet interface, and we'll talk about that later, as well as Wi-Fi. So you can effectively have 4 different pathways to provide dial tone resiliency to the panel, which is a huge benefit. And this is an automatic failover, automatic failback. We are TAA compliant for anyone that may have some government customers in the Fed that may require a TAA compliant device. And the great thing about this is we all know, right, a security system, fire system, those panels all have backup batteries. Well, we did that. We built the UPS inside of the device. So the device has a 24-hour graceful backup battery. So what that means by graceful is if you were to have a call in progress on the panel and we were to unplug AC power from the device, that call in progress will not drop. It will continue on, as that is a graceful failover. Now, before I continue to turnkey installation, I just want to draw your attention to the bottom of this slide. MetTel is recognized as a managed facilities voice network provider by the New York City Fire Department, and we have been approved by California State Fire Marshal, and our equipment is on their building, their BML program. So, you don't have to worry about getting any pushback regarding these systems. We have got a lot of great benefit and interaction with a lot of AHJs out there. Continuing on to turnkey installation. We have certified PMPs all over the country. So a PM would be assigned to you and to your customers, and they would help with the ordering of equipment, scheduling any smart hands that may be necessary in the event that you required our assistance to perform an install. We're able to port any existing customer publish lines. So if you're going after their dial tone for their security or their fire system, but they also have some phones or fax machines that are published, well, we can definitely make sure that we can retain those phone numbers for those customers, and we can port them over to our SIP backbone. We are, like I mentioned earlier, we are a fully managed service and recognized 4 times by Gartner for that, because we are 24/7 by 365. And this is where I'm going to this is where I start to smile through the presentation a little bit. With a POTS line, how do you know it's not working? Well, you have to pick up the phone, right? If you're in an elevator, you've got to go and push the button. If you're a fire panel or your alarm panel, well, eventually it's going to go into a local enunciation fault. But, what if that's on a weekend when there's no one there? We're relying on maybe timer tests telling us that, or it's a security system without a contract vehicle that says that we're going to be looking for timer tests. Well, that system could be dead in the water and no one knows over the weekend while that location is unmanned. Well, with MetTel, we're able to monitor whether or not that panel has dial tone. So I'm able to monitor from the dial tone interface on the premise equipment to the front of the device for its uplinks, whether or not that's LTE or wired internet, and then all the way back through our voice core and finally external to the PSTN with full AI monitored interaction with that, where most of our issues self-heal within a handful of minutes. It's a big benefit over a traditional POTS line. Another thing is we are able to do fully managed remote updates. So what we do from a provisioning perspective with the LTE connectivity is we don't just throw a carrier SIM in there and call it a day. We've actually built out what we call private LTE networks, and they're broken up into 4 geographic regions throughout the country across both AT&T and Verizon. And that provides us 2 benefits. The first benefit being that we get some priority over your typical end user cell phone traffic on the tower. And additionally, we're able to deliver these devices with what are called static IP addresses. And since those IP addresses are static and they do not change, anyone from a MetTel NOC behind our VPN connections is able to directly reach out, log into that device, and perform remote troubleshooting and remote management, as well as updates. That's a huge benefit over a lot of the other pieces of equipment on the market that effectively are black boxes that require truck rolls to be able to change or do really anything with them. Another thing we're able to do is, in the event of a customer ordering from you, say, 2 alarm lines for a fire system, and then they say, hey, these alarm lines have been working great. I'd like you to also, save me some money on my voice bill, right? Rather than having to go and, go through a quote and all this, this business red tape, if you will. There's no manual provisioning here. We're able to go into our TEM platform called Bruin. We're able to select that device, click add a new DID or direct inward dial telephone number to that device. And within a handful of minutes, that port on that device is now lit up green and it's ready for a physical cross connect to that customer's endpoint. It's all very, very quickly. And if you wanted to change that endpoint from a voice line to a fax line or to an ATM, whatever that is, it's a simple change ticket through our system. And this kind of dovetails this last pillar here. It dovetails with that LTE carrier stuff I was talking about, right? We are across the country. We do have 22 geo-redundant session managers, and we do have access to over 70 carriers interconnects on our network. So when you think about our MetTel network, we are not single-threaded in any one part of the country. In fact, I originate the what are effectively voice over IP or POTS transformation services out of one of 6 data centers geographically closest to where that customer is physically located, with redundant failover between the next 3 geographically closest points of presence. So if I was to lose a data center, the device would sub-second fail over to the next one, and then so on and so forth, and then seamlessly back. So there's a lot of redundancy built into the core in order to ensure that, these fire and life safety systems always have dial tone. Jack, if you could continue. So now let's talk a little bit about the device. The prem equipment, as we like to call it, is manufactured. It's called the CDS 90XX. And we say XX because there are two different flavors currently. There's the 9090, which you have the graphic of on the right, and then there is the 9010. The important differentiator between these two devices is physical media ports, right? On the 9090, it can provide dial tone to two different analog endpoints. I'm sorry, the 9010. And on the 9090, you can provide dial tone to up to 8 analog endpoints. And then there's also some physical LAN ports as well that can be used in the event of, say, maybe having an IP-enabled camera in an elevator shaft or an elevator cab that needs connectivity to the internet. That can be provided there as well. You also can see we have a wired WAN port there. So if the customer has an existing broadband connection, we could plug into that for primary. And then we have some LTE antennas as well as some Wi-Fi antennas if Wi-Fi was in spec. One thing to note, Jack, can you go backwards? Thank you. One thing to note, the battery is internal to the device. So if we were to have this graphic do a 180 turnaround on its x-axis, we would see that there would be 4 thumb screws. You just pop those thumb screws off, remove the faceplate, and then you can gain access to the battery compartment. The battery is rated for a 5-year lifespan, and typical MetTel contract terms are 3 years. So by the time the device is ready for replacement, you're not having to worry about it. The battery's still good. We just go ahead and put it on either replace the device, replace the battery. Lot of easy things that can happen. And then regarding UL certifications, the battery is UL 2054 and the device is 60950-1, which is a prescriptive UL standard for rating the communications device for alarm and fire signaling transport. And then we also have a performance standard, 68392, I believe, but don't quote me on that. I can get you that UL after this call, but that would be our performance-based standard. In the event that the customer would like some additional features for their voice-enabled lines, we do have a feature matrix that we can provide, and some of those voice features are called out here on the bottom left, and you're free to review those when the deck is shared after this call. Go ahead. So what do you get when you place an order for the device? Well, you get a lot, and you get it shipped to you in one of two flavors, right? You could have the full kit, which is what's pictured on the right, or you could have just the device and its antennas, and the rest of the cabling and physical work is on up to you and your technicians. The way we prefer to deliver the equipment, though, is pre-mounted on a backboard. As you can see, this is the 9090 equipment with 8 FXSs. It's handing off that to an RJ21X, which is physically connected to a 66 block. We have a power strip with a 25-foot cable, 25-foot power cord, and then we also have an external antenna on the top, which is about 9.5 feet of coax, so you can get that antenna up into the ceiling or maybe into another room where the LTE signal is performing better. Again, this is an option, but we found that our tech teams would be able to get in and out of a customer facility much quicker, thereby reducing cost of the time of the tech by delivering everything pre-done in our warehouse. And this comes at no additional cost. It's just something we do. You don't have to have it like this, but we do prefer to deliver it like this. Jack, you can continue. And then this is an example of the smaller 2-port device pre-mounted. Instead of using a 66 block, we're just handing off the dial tone to 2 independent biscuit jacks, which have RJ11 connectors there. So you would just remove the dial tone from the incumbent block and then connect it into ours, and dial tone would then be presented to the security panel. Now, scaled service delivery, this is a really, really big benefit, right? It's, you have to coordinate, resources on our side and on your side in order to have a successful turnup, right? And we call this our service delivery team. And, Jack and our professional PM team that would be associated with each of your accounts would be able to effectively coordinate any needed MetTel resources to provide remote troubleshooting or assist with porting and things of that nature during your turn updates. Jack, if you could continue. All right. So let's take us through the life cycle here, right? So the first part is the staging and kitting, right? So that's that getting it up on the backboard, getting it shipped out and sent on site. The next is deployment, right? We want to schedule and coordinate that time with the customer, figure out what the site survey looks like, where that dial tone is located, how many analog endpoints are being serviced. And one thing to note, right, we don't share lines with this. I know often in the security world, we would take that secondary line that's associated with a Berg panel and maybe use it for a fax line or for a voice line. Unfortunately, that's something we can't do with this service because of how the intelligence is built into the unit to care for fire and alarm signaling. It's very purpose built in that the device learns the type of alarm format being sent, whether that's contact ID or modem 3 or modem 2 or modem 3A2 or modem 4, pulse, what have you. And it basically conditions itself and the SIP trunk that's being delivered to retain that audio very clean throughout the call path. So unfortunately, you can't share lines of service with other analog devices like you could on a traditional POTS line. However, if you were to say have a customer that was that had say multiple analog telephones being serviced by a single POTS line, that is something we could do because the device does support a REN or ringer equivalence number of 5, just like a typical POTS line. So from there, we have our professional installation that would be, again, coordinated with our service delivery and customer engineering teams to ensure that you do have sufficient remote support during your day of turnup and that you do have the things happening on the back end that are necessary for customers to port their numbers and to have all of the day 2 success. The next is remote firmware updates. Remote firmware updates are typically done once a year. Outside of that, it's a coordinated event with the customer, and there is minimal downtime of anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes as that firmware update is processed. It's typically not long enough for a supervision timer on a panel to even detect that it doesn't have dial tone and throw a phone event. The next is the AI monitoring alerts. I touched on this a little earlier, right? That I kind of know if the elevator has dial tone or not, but actually I know a lot more than that. So not only do I know if the FXSs have dial tone, I know if the device is using LTE, I know which carrier it's using, I know if it's failing over, I know if it's using the customer provided access, I know if it's on battery or not, I know the state of the battery, I know if it's in call. And all of those things are fed into our AI engine, which then has very specific criteria and algorithms for determining, is this something that it can self-heal, or is this something that requires the engagement of a human, right? And in the event that it requires the engagement of a human, that AI will then generate a ticket to us. That ticket will serve 2 purposes. One, it's a call to work to our network operations team that a given device has an issue that needs to be remediated. And 2, it also provides proactive notification to you that that line of service is having an issue or the state of the device as it was designed to be implemented has changed, or if there's been a power failure, right? All of these things are business intelligence items that you just didn't have from a POTS line prior. And now that last thing is emergency break fix, right? We all know bad things happen. A pipe bursts, all the telco equipment got soaking wet. What do we do? MetTel, how quickly can you get us a device? Typically, if we are alerted before 1 p.m. Eastern that there has been an issue and the device needs emergency replacement, we will have a device ready for replacement and on site by 9 a.m. local the next day. That is, if it's after 1 p.m., we will do our best to make that, but oftentimes it would be then the following day that you would receive that equipment. But we try to get to that 24-hour minimum time to repair as quickly as possible in the event of an emergency repair replacement. Jack, go ahead and continue. Now, before we go through this, I did see there were some questions. Do we want to hold those questions for the end, or do we want to review them now?
That is completely up to y'all. If you'd like, I can read some off to you, or we can save it to the end.
So I can go ahead and answer a couple of these.
Okay. Yeah,
So
let me read them off to you, unless you can
thank
see
you.
them yourself.
Yeah, I can see them. Thank you.
Yeah.
So would you be willing to work outside the U.S. and Caribbean? Yes, anywhere where the North American numbering plan is honored, we can deliver dial tone. So we do have services in Mexico, Puerto Rico, Canada, the U.S. Virgin Islands, many of those territories. So typically, if they are using the North American dial plan, we can deliver service. And then please address the best approach to an introduction, also to cover some of the objections we may face. So a lot of times you're going to find that a lot of central stations will push back and say, this isn't a compatible piece of equipment, but in reality, it's incredibly compatible. We have, tens of thousands of these devices serving, hundreds of thousands of alarm panels out there in the wild today. It's really the play, and Jack, if you want to, help me on this one, since you're more on the sales side of things. It's really two things, right? It's a cost savings play, and it's also kind of future proofing, right? If you're with the POTS lines going away, eventually you're going to have to upgrade that panel, right? But if the POTS lines don't go away in the form of being able to deliver this piece of equipment on-prem, well, that's an issue a customer doesn't have to think about anymore for as long as they didn't have to think about it when POTS was a thing. So that's kind of how, we kind of position it. And we also position it as something that allows us to upsell to additional Mettel provided services like our wired area networks products, our security infrastructure products, and things like that. I hope that answers your question. Jack, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I believe you covered it. I mean, eventually we're going to be driven off of POTS lines. It's just a matter of if it's next week, next month, or 6 months from now. But eventually, this solution is going to become more and more prevalent within the marketplace. So just a matter of being ahead of the curve.
All right, thank you, Jack. And then Rick, what voltage is the off-hook condition? So Rick, that is entirely configurable for each FXS. So each FXS has its own independent configuration parameters. Our typical dial tone off-hook is 54 volts, but that can be completely customized upwards of 62 volts. So that is our upper limit, and typically has been enough to service all of the endpoints that we've come across. But again, that is configurable to the need. And that's the same with ringing voltage and on-hook voltage. And I'm sorry, you said off-hook, not on-hook. So on-hook would be 54. Typically off-hook, we're between 7 and 8, depending upon the impedance on the line. And then when will the release of 5G ultra wideband units out? 5G units are currently in testing in my lab, and I hope to be able to release them before the end of the year. And then, are you in partner integrations with any central stations? The answer is yes. We are in partner agreement with a very large central station in the United States, and they do resell our services to their own customers in a very similar fashion to how the audience on this call would be working and engaging with Mettel.
Greg, why don't you mention about the 4G being sufficient for covering all of the data usage on the 8 lines?
Yeah, no problem, Jack. Thank you for that. So yes, and regarding data usage, right? 5G is great. It's an excellent marketing word. As someone who spent many years in AT&T's radio access network, I can tell you that it's still not quite there yet, but the bandwidth to have all 8 FXS users talking at the same exact time is a little less than 1 megabit per second up and down. So LTE is, it's not going away for the next 20, 25 years, and it's going to be more than sufficient to deliver the bandwidth necessary for these analog devices to function correctly. And then Hank, yes, so this is a two-way calling, right? So in the event that you have a person in an elevator that pushes that button and needs to be able to speak with fire life safety or whomever whomever the EMS is on the other side. Yes, it is two-way audio. And it also supports call disconnect supervision, right? So an elevator doesn't always have a method to terminate that phone call, and so the device has what's called calling party control, and will basically disable it entirely. And yes, Resideo Vista panels and Compass communication are fully supported. Again, it's not the panels so much that we support, Peter, it's the communication format in use with the panel. And Compass, many of our central stations are programming their Vista panels through Compass every day, all day, using our CPE equipment. All right, thank you for the questions, everyone. I'm going to just kind of take you a little bit, no, go back. I'd like to go through this just little architecture here. So here you can see kind of on the left-hand side, say we've got a fire or elevator system on the left. We have that demarcation point between the telco and the FC and the fire alarm control panel. That's typically why we deliver that 66 block on the board along with those biscuit jacks. And we can see that dial tones being connected into FXS 8 of the 9090. On the front side of things, we have this device has been provisioned with wired broadband access. It's got 4G and also has been given Wi-Fi. So this device has technically four, right? Because we've got wired, we've got AT&T and Verizon in the middle, and then we've got a dissimilar Wi-Fi network as fourth. So four different methods of retaining dial tone. We have those 6 points of presence for the MetTel cloud, and then we have our pillar of monitoring, right? That's our core. So that's where all the magic happens. You know, typically in the past, I'm sure you've all come across customers that tried to place their alarm panels on Cisco SPA devices or AdTran, IAD devices, and they just didn't work, right? They did not play nice with VoIP. And the difference between our solution and those legacy solutions is our application servers, which live in our MetTel cloud as well as on the device itself. And that goes back to that whole line sharing and line conditioning thing, right? We need certain characteristics of the SIP trunk to function different ways for, say, contact ID versus how it would work for, you know, a BFSK alarm format or, you know, modem 2 or modem 3, right? So that's what really is the functioning process that allows us to transport central station signals successfully, whereas others will have intermittent success. And finally, we have our partners that will hand that call off to the PSTN. And finally, bring down to the central station. And you see where it says ring down, right? Some elevators specifically, if anyone's familiar, you know, they don't have their own dialers and they function off of a ring down circuit, kind of like the old bat phone in the 1980s or 70s. I'll date myself, I'm in the 80s when I was watching that. So, you know, Commissioner Gordon would grab the red phone, it would automatically dial Batman. Well, it's a similar scenario, right? We will program the emergency services number on that given FXS that's handing off dial tone to an elevator. And as soon as someone who is trapped in the elevator pushes the call button, the device will automatically dial that 10-digit phone number. Then Jack, you want to continue? So here's how we are NFPA compliant. And this is very important for everyone to understand. We sit on the telco side of the DMARC. We are not fire life safety equipment. We are telecommunications equipment. Therefore, we are not UL 864 like you would have with a Honeywell communicator or with a SureGuard communicator or a Starlink, right? We are on the telco side of the DMARC, just like you would have with an IP-enabled fire panel that is using a customer switch or router, right? That's not a UL 864 device. So we provide that 66 block and those biscuit jacks to have a clear demarcation point between the telco provided cabling, which would be our outside wire in this case, even though it now kind of lives inside the customer prem, and the inside wire on the opposite side, which is connected to the fire panel. This division of responsibility for where the dial tone is very important for compliance with life safety, because without that demarcation point to split us, we would then be considered fire communications equipment. Again, we provide dial tone and voltage, so we're effectively as far as a fire panel or a security panel or elevator is concerned, they just think it's a POTS line, just like they always did, because they're just seeing 54 volts on hook. They're seeing 8 or 9 volts, off hook. Ringing is at what it's at. So again, that's all very important to understand when talking through this with your customers and whether or not compliance is an issue. Jack, do you want to continue? And again, this kind of goes through it. I'm not going to read this slide to you word for word. You can, read it at your leisure. But this kind of covers exactly what I was just talking about. We are effectively a managed facilities voice network product. And, we provide loop start dial tone. We provide 25-second monitoring of every node along the alarm call path. We provide more than 8 hours of standby power. We provide 24. And we are fully compliant with the MFVN aspect of NFPA 72. If you have any follow-up questions regarding that, please feel free to submit them to Hannah and the ESA team, and they will get those questions over to Jack and myself, and we will be happy to answer them. We also have some additional SMEs who, if you do ask us a question that we do not immediately know the answer to, we will be able to get the answer for you. Go ahead and continue. And then, Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about the sales side of things? How we do some engagement?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's run through if there's any other questions. I don't know, Hannah, if you have any other questions that you want to share.
Yeah, we had some that were submitted. One was just to clarify, does this allow for any type of dialer capture for elevators or panels that cannot be reprogrammed?
So it really is it's really the alarm format, Eric, that's in use on that panel, right? For elevators, it's very simple. If you can't reprogram the elevator to call to, like, let's say you're taking over an existing monitoring contract for an elevator, and you can't reprogram it for whatever reason, well, we can leverage the hotline function or ring down function, if you will, that I was speaking about earlier, and we can put your monitoring whether or not that's a toll-free or a 10-digit local number, we can put that in that config parameter, and it'll call you instead of what the elevator is currently pre-programmed to dial. In the event for, say, a panel that, you can't get in and reprogram that panel to talk to your central station receivers as opposed to the others, well, we can just, again, we can change that within the configuration, and it'll dial yours. Does that answer your question? Great.
Yes, he says that's perfect. Quick response. Let's see. We have what happens if you need more than 8 lines at a location?
So we stack additional boxes. And what's really cool about these devices is we can stack them together using one customer WAN port, right? So customers, let's say the customer has a broadband modem with only one available access point, right? We'll plug into that Ethernet port, we'll plug into box 1, and then we will use the device's internal switch to daisy chain more of them together. Now, logically, this says, okay, if my bus crashes, I'm all going to crash, right? But no, what happens is that in the event that the customer broadband circuit goes down or loses power, what have you, all devices down the chain will all turn on their own internal LTE instead of being single threaded to box 1. So we can, stack these devices very, very high. There's a very large building with 72 lines of service that we provide connectivity to elevators to. And they have 9 devices stacked together.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions that were submitted. Okay. If we need an additional phone line at a location we already installed the unit in, how does that work?
So that's real simple. That's a request to your project manager that gets assigned to you. That project manager will go into our TEM platform, or telecom expense management platform, called Bruin. They'll go to that customer location. They'll click on the device. and they'll click add line. And they'll specify the line type based on your input, whether or not it's for an elevator or an alarm panel or a fax machine. They'll specify that line type and they'll click submit. Then our API will grab that. It will go into our soft switch. It will build out that new telephone number and what's called user. And then that device's configuration will be updated within the next hour, or we can do a manual reboot. It will check in and download the device, download its new configuration, and then you will have that dial tone spun up for that new endpoint.
Excellent. It looks like Eric submitted another question. Is there a self-service portal so we don't have to call the PM?
Absolutely, Eric. You can be fully enabled and trained to use our portal, and you don't need to rely on our PM.
Great. And then this was just a note, not necessarily a question, but just a note to all is that AT&T is starting the deploy their option of this type of service with the VAB/1 units. So get out there and sell before they do. ...
Thanks, Rick.
Nice.
That's feedback we like.
So
right.
yeah, and then to Greg's point, this is something that we're doing for a lot of customers similar to yourselves, and it's something that if you're interested in, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to schedule some more time, walk through any questions you may have, and get you turned up on our service.
Okay. I think we have a few more questions. Do you want me to keep going through those? I just want to make sure I'm not interrupting your presentation.
Nope, we're definitely ready for questions.
Okay, perfect. All right. Another one we had submitted was, can you clarify what you mean by monitoring? We are already monitoring the alarm panels.
So you're monitoring the alarm panel. I'm monitoring the call path for the alarm panel, right? So I'm looking at, is the dial tone present so the alarm panel can make a phone call? I'm monitoring the interface status and the general health and well-being of the device. I'm also monitoring all of the voice nodes beyond that to make sure that there's nothing upstream that could be causing an issue with the alarm signaling successfully landing on the central station alarm receivers.
Excellent. And then let's see. Do you have success dealing with older alarm panel formats?
Yes. So, modem 2 is a pretty old format. I think that predates, me for all intents and purposes. And where we found a unique alarm format, we've actually found that we've been able to successfully work to supporting it. So, we didn't start, supporting them all out of the gate, right? We had to crawl, walk, and then finally run to be able to support all of the different formats that we do. But we support almost all major formats across the board, outside of a single proprietary format.
Excellent. All right, I only see one more question here. It says you mentioned there are 2 SIM slots. Are the data plans included by Mettel, or do we get our own data plans?
So the data plans are included by Mettel, and there's something pretty interesting that we do here, right? So being that you would be our customer, all of your devices will get pooled together. So let me walk that back a second. If you order a device, we will place a data plan on the AT&T SIM, let's say 1 gig. The Verizon data plan will be a pay-per-use plan. Now, in the event that the device fails over from AT&T to Verizon and it's used 500 megs of data, so half of its available plan, and then it uses, say, 250 megs or a remaining 25% of the available plan, and then your billing cycle ends. Well, you're still, regardless of it being on two different carriers, we're pooling those together in what we call cross-carrier pooling. So you're still under your 1 gig data plan. And then on top of it, regardless of how many different customers you sell to, because this is effectively your data plan, all of those customers are pooled together. So you could have 500, you could have a terabyte, you could have 1.5 terabytes of total available data plan for all of your customers. And some of your customers, they might be using a primary wired uplink that's unmetered. So, with that LTE data is kind of sitting idle. So if somebody does fail over and happens to use a lot of data, you're not necessarily going into an overage.
Gotcha. Someone added to that, asking the cost, and then Rick also asked, he has to ask about the BFSK format.
So real quick, Jack, I'll answer Rick. BFSK is supported. That's correct. And then, yeah. And then,
and
back
then
to two sales questions. I think.
Yeah, as far as pricing goes, if you're interested, please reach out to us, and we'll walk you through the pricing plans available.
That's looks like there was another sales side question. Is there a way to order a demo or test unit to test one out?
So usually what we do at this point, we've rolled these out, as Greg mentioned, tens of thousands across the country at this point. So as far as, we know it works. If you guys need to see it work, we totally understand it. On the initial deployments that you guys have, we totally expect it to function perfectly. But if you have any issues on the initial deployments and you want to return the device, we'll work with you on doing that.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions that I have submitted now, unless anybody wants to add any last ones before we actually close this count.
All right. Greg, thanks for
We're
that.
good.
That was very informative.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I appreciated your time today.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Security Pros. You know how to get a hold of Jack and Greg here, or any of us at ESA if you have any follow-up questions. Again, the on-demand session will be available to you tomorrow to be able to share with your colleagues, and have a great rest of your day.